Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Beyond Seven Figures podcast. So, today's guest, he's been a Forbes 30 under 30 member. This young entrepreneur has had quite the success while in his 20s. So, that would be quite fascinating to understand more details there. He's the CEO and co-founder of a company called STRV. It's a design and engineering company that built products for prominent startups like Class Dojo, The Athletic, Citizen, and well-established brands like Microsoft and Berries. So without further ado, welcome to the show. And I hope I don't pronounce your name incorrectly. Is it Lubo Smid? Is that right?
That is correct. Thank you so much for having me, Charles. It's my pleasure.
You are very welcome. All right. Let's see. This company right now, STRV, you started it in 2012. How old were you in 2012?
In 2012, wow, let's do the math. It's been quite some time ago. I was about 23 at that time.
Got it. So 23 years old to start a software design and engineering company. Is that how it started, was software design and engineering?
Well, I would just put things in a perspective a little bit. It was in 2012 when I joined my co-founders. But even before that, I was doing my thing as a freelance web developer, and they were doing their thing, and the company was already like operating a little bit at that time. So when I joined them, it was already a group of 5 to 10 people, mostly part-time during studies. So there was not really like a moment that we got together and we say, okay, this is a starting point, and from here onwards we are building the company, right? I think that things are usually a little bit more fluid, but throughout my studies, I have been doing a lot of software engineering on a side or as a freelancer. But yeah, 2012 for me was the year that I dove into it, and we really started building up the company with my co-founders.
When I introduced this show, we talked about the ups and downs while building a $20 million company and working with some of the larger Fortune 500 brands. So let's make sure we finish on a high note. Let's start with the downs. So what would you say some of the biggest struggles that you've had in building this company has been?
Well, there's been many, and I like the approach that we will finish on the high note. And I have to say that when you are doing something for so many years, and I feel like, it's 12th year for me in the company, and certainly there's been moments, there's been a lot of ups and downs, but I feel like if you are an entrepreneur, that's actually what drives you, right? Getting through these obstacles, solving difficult challenges, and figuring out novel ways how to do things. And when I look back at the journey, it's not that I would be regretting anything. I think that like it all led to myself and the entire team learning a big lesson in all aspects of what we do. But certainly, as you mentioned, right, of course, there's been a lot of down moments and a lot of big challenges. I would just name a few. If you are like a first-time founder and you are building the company with no prior experience, like it's great that you have wonderful attitude and you are giving it your best, but you don't have the experience from the past that you could tap into. And sometimes you just make mistakes and you have to learn from them. And of course, things change. And I think that like every company during different stages needs different things. And if you don't have the experience with that, then in certain cases, you just hit the wall and you have to kind of figure out how to get through it. So of course, like the standard challenges that you are too ambitious and you start too many things at the same time, you can't finance it all, you don't have enough people, you don't have enough business, you have people that are not happy within the company. I could go on, and there's like so many of these challenges. I think what we are experiencing right now is an interesting moment where we see a lot of, I would say, shifts in our client portfolio because a lot of the companies are having challenging moments. So they don't have budgets to spend. And of course, that influences us. And we have seen something very similar throughout 2020 with the pandemic, when simply like from one day to another, like the whole market condition just changed forever. And we had to pretty much rebuild the client portfolio because
Sure.
suddenly like businesses had to adapt to the current market condition. It was just different. So you see these challenges, they come, they go. Sometimes you end up in a situation that you are running out of money. Sometimes you don't have enough people. Sometimes you don't have the right strategy or thinking to accomplish certain things. But like in my case, especially, I'm very ambitious and I have a tendency to sometimes put too much on my plate. So I have to also like hold myself back a little bit so I don't go crazy. But at the same time, you want to be ambitious, right? You don't want to be building a company that is not growing and so on. So I think it's good to find the middle ground. And also a great lesson learned for me was to realize that like I can only do like one thing very, very well. And if I split my time between 10 different things, then they likely are not going to go anywhere.
Sure.
So I will let you double click on any one of them that you would like in particular.
You mentioned right now that you're switching the type of clients that you're working with, and you had to do that again back in 2020. Way back in the day, a mentor of mine who used to be Tony Robbins' mentor, Tony Robbins, like this big peak performance coach, he said to me one time, he said the number one characteristic that he found in an entrepreneur was that of their ability to adapt. So an entrepreneur's ability to adapt is actually the number one characteristic behind successful entrepreneurs. And what you did in 2020 was adapt. What you did right now in this current market environment is adapt. And businesses, when faced with a major situation, particularly like the one that we had faced in 2020 and the inflection point that we're facing again in 2023 with maybe a recession, is this idea of, do we change the market to meet the message? Do we change the message to meet the market? Or do we change both the market and the message? And in your case, you changed the market. And it sounds like that's worked out very well for you.
It's something that I keep coming back to. And if you go and ask my team, what's my most used expression, it's we will figure it out. I think that it's extremely important that you, as a leader, keep positive mindset. Even when things are sour, you should still keep the positive face. And it's not easy because like when things get fierce, you have a lot of things going on and you have to think and figure out where to go. But if you keep the positive spin, you will find a way out of it. As you mentioned, like being able to adapt is very crucial. And that's the way how you resolve these situations. Because in the end, like everything is solvable with the right attitude. Yes, sometimes you have to take steps that are not nice. You, in certain cases, have to touch the team. Like we see it on many companies these days that they are unfortunately forced to do so, right? Because they need to adapt in a way that they can't keep the entire team around, unfortunately. You need to be able to work with that. And if that is in your arsenal of skills, then you are a lot more resilient to stick around.
Now, I'm actually going to suggest maybe something else. And I know you said positive mindset, and I've talked about positive mindset a lot. But then I realized something when I was talking to another entrepreneur, the difference between a positive mindset and a proactive mindset, which is different. And a positive mindset is somebody who says, okay, this is going to work out. But what you did is you created a powerful proactive mindset where it was, we're going to figure this out and we're going to do it. And it was about being proactive. What is the outcome that we want? And how are we going to continue to solve this? And why did this problem create an opportunity for us? Versus the opposite is a reactive. And a reactive mindset can oftentimes be one that is a negative mindset where, oh, this happened to me. Oh, this keeps happening to me. Why is it always that when we take one step forward, we feel like we take two steps back? The economy is this and that. And it's very reactionary based instead of being proactive and saying, well, what do we want? How do we go get it?
100%. And I think that it's the mindset that steers the other people, right? So if you think positively and you spread that energy, it influences other people. But you also need a strategy, right? It's not that you can just sit in your chair and think positively. There needs to be actions taken. Otherwise, you are not able to achieve that. And like your podcast is called Beyond Seven Figures, right? And I feel like if you are leading a company that is in this scale, I think that's where it starts to be interesting, because you no longer can influence a whole lot just by the amount of work that you do. You need to start thinking about surrounding yourself with the right team, having the right strategy, and then being the cheerleader for the entire team. These are, for me, like the three key criterias of being a great leader for a scaling organization, where you no longer can influence things by working 16, 18-hour work days. And I think that that goes hand in hand with, not just thinking positively, but also, like, as you mentioned, being proactive. And on the flip side, you definitely don't want to be delusional, right? You don't want to be too positive that the things that you have in your mind are borderline impossible. I think that's something that needs to be calibrated as well. The level of positivity has some limits. And of course, like, high goals and high visions are great. We have seen it many, many times in the history where someone had a vision that other people think it was like impossible, and they made it, right? So we see these success stories. So I don't want to discourage anyone that something is impossible, but I think some level of self-realization is also good.
I get this question all the time is, how do you know when it doesn't work anymore? Or, how do you know when you need to throw in the towel? Another mentor of mine said, you're at the closest to success you'll ever be at the very moment you want to give up more than anything else in the world. When it's time to give up is when you look at the data and you're no longer optimizing the data and seeing improvements. Sometimes you have to be able to let go of the outcome and just focus on the data and just obsess yourself over what's working and what's not working, what's working, what's not working. So you can do more of what's working and less of what's not working, and focus more so on the action and driving the action and driving the action. Consistent, persistent, imperfect action. Just go for it. Full on. Put the pedal to the metal and take massive amounts of action and focus in on optimizing the data and the results.
Yeah, and I hear it from the people all the time. And these are like some of the most successful people that I have in my network, that it really pushed them to the very edge of where they could survive with their companies to make a breakthrough, right? And you hear these stories over and over again. And sometimes it's that very moment that brings in an investor that suddenly changes everything, or you just realize that you need to change the product in a novel way that you couldn't think before.
We make decisions for two reasons, either desperation or inspiration. And more times than not, when you're really thinking about it, you know that there's something you should be doing right now, that there's something else that you're doing that you should be doing, but you don't do it. And you don't do it because it's either uncomfortable, it's scary, it makes you nervous. And so you're like, you know what, I'm gonna wait to do this, or I'll do it tomorrow, or I'll do it next week or next quarter or whatnot. And then what ends up happening to a lot of these people is they get put in this situation where business is now struggling, or they're in a lot of pain with their business. And that's when they finally realize that making the uncomfortable action becomes necessary. And when they take that uncomfortable action, that's oftentimes when the massive breakthrough ends up happening.
That's 100% right. And I can totally confirm that that's how it worked for me as well. Because if you get into a tough spot, then suddenly you have to take these actions and you have to make those decisions that you were just postponing. Because when things are bright and shiny, you don't feel like going and doing a tough decision that bears some like negative aspects of it. But if you have no other way, it's like flip of a switch. You go and you do it because you have to. It just opens up a lot of doors. So when we experience these downturns, I perceive them as an opportunity to clean things up, to get better, stronger, more resilient. And of course, it's not nice, but I think it's part of the journey.
Let's now talk about working with Fortune 500 brands. What can you tell us about working with these big companies?
For me, like, it's a very unique opportunity for a small company like STRV to suddenly make a deal with Fortune 500 company. It's something that you are not used to, something that gives a lot of stability, something that really, really helps the business. But on the flip side, you also need to get there somehow, and you need to figure out a way how to establish that business relationship. And for a company that does not have a lot of strong references, it's hard, right? And you have to network your way up. You have to build trust, build the relationships, because like these deals, they're not gonna happen overnight. And I can just share an example. I will not disclose the name of who I have talked to earlier today, but it was a company, very respected brand across the entire United States, and I could say across the world. And just the fact that they perceived me as a strong partner and they were turning to us as somebody who could help them, it was such a great feeling. And I think that we would not be able to enter those discussions without having the track record that we have now.
So how did you even get the opportunity to speak to a Fortune 500 company to pitch them on the services?
Well, that's, I would say, a strong networking game that you have to play, and you have to figure out your way through and just build relationships. I think that's the key, right? And what I would say to that is, if you are a founder and you have started your own business and you are thinking about hiring your own sales team, well, the best deals are likely not going to come through them right away, or they are not going to come easy, because this just requires a rigorous amount of effort to go and explore. I see it as a different league, right? If you are a small company and you work with startups, you work with local small and medium businesses, and you want to make that leap, well, I think that you are the best position to do that as a founder, and you have to power through that and deploy some of your biggest efforts.
When you're working with 7 and 8 figure companies, oftentimes they're what I call rational buyers, because you're going to deal directly with a decision maker many times, who oftentimes is either the CEO, or for a mid 8 figure company and larger, might be a CMO, but they can make decisions. And then when you start going to 9 figure companies and above, it's decision by committee. At that point, it's not necessarily a rational decision, because the person who is making a decision has to answer to a boss. And instead of saying, okay, so, STRV may offer the best service going, instead they're asking themselves different questions like, why would STRV be the safest company for us to work with? Because, if I make a bad decision, I could potentially get fired. So that becomes sort of the irrational side. And to crack the nut of working with the Fortune 500 brands, more often than not, it does become relationships rather than scalable marketing and sales strategies. It does become relationships, because a good relationship with somebody helps to bridge the gap between, I don't know who you are, and this is going to be a safe bet.
And what I would say to that, there is also a piece of experience that I have, and exactly what you mentioned. You are building these relationships. People are like betting on you that you will deliver great job. So they are not questioned by their manager, supervisor, CEO, anyone like that. And then what happens on the flip side, if you do a great job, well, the fact is that people change companies fairly often these days. But what's the good thing, that you establish that one relationship and you work with somebody, they left the company, they went elsewhere. And I can confirm that we have seen tremendous success, like as we have been doing this for a long time now, that we now have case studies of individuals, and I'm saying hypothetical case studies, right? We don't publish them anywhere, but there are living humans that worked with us in 3 or 4 different companies. As they move, they always bring us in, and we do either a long-term engagement with us or something smaller. But to me, that only confirms that, like, if you build a strong relationship, if you focus on delivering great level of service, then great things are awaiting for you in the future.
A quick segue. I know you're a big fan of Web 3.0 and you're a big fan of blockchain as well. So why do you believe all businesses and entrepreneurs should embrace Web 3.0 and blockchain? Just sort of seems like anything crypto related has taken a little bit of a hit.
I know that there's a lot of skepticism in the space right now. And there's a lot of bad actors in the space. And I think that there is a lot of bad actors for a reason, because this is a gold rush, or at least used to be positioned as a gold rush, because we are very early on. But the reason I say that I'm very interested in Web3 and blockchain is that I look at it from a lens of a tech person. And I find it like blockchain as a very powerful tool that could be leveraged for many great things. And it doesn't matter whether it's in the finance space, whether it's, for example, what we do with one of our products in the ticketing space. It can help bring great benefits. And I think that we will see more and more of these great use cases that are built on blockchain. And I just feel like right now, people should at least be getting familiar with what it could mean for their business and looking for the use cases. I'm not suggesting anyone to suddenly switch the direction of their startup and just put blockchain in their tagline or AI in their tagline just to make it more appealing, but genuinely think about how these technologies could be leveraged to make the product better. I'm a firm believer that blockchain is here to stay and there will be great use cases. Is it going to be for everyone in all the aspects of what they do? Definitely not. But I think that people that are like not looking at it, they can miss out on the opportunity, right? And if we go, I don't know, 30, 40 years back and we say, you should start thinking about like what computers are going to do for the way how we run businesses, or what internet has done to how we operate today, what mobile has done to how we communicate and how we interact with each other. And you see all of these milestones of what happened in the history. And I think that blockchain is just another piece that will change the game quite dramatically. But of course, like it's going to be applicable only in certain areas.
If anything, to Lubo's point, is just being aware of what's happening, just so that it doesn't catch you by surprise. And the same thing Lubo mentioned earlier about AI. Bill Gates said recently that AI will be the single biggest disruptor since the internet. And we've already seen that today. For those who truly understand how to take advantage of AI, it's been massively disrupting. And every person in every role of every company in any industry has the opportunity to, at some point, leverage AI to some degree in their role. AI takes many different forms, way beyond just Chat GPT, right? But there's opportunities all over the place. And if you're not getting the results that you expect to get with AI, well, it comes down to garbage in, garbage out. It just means you're not putting the right inputs in. Therefore, you're not getting the right inputs out.
Just to piggyback a little bit on what you mentioned about AI, I think that it's becoming a lot more accessible. And what we see, not just ChatGPT, as you mentioned, but like in terms of new use cases and new applications of AI that are suddenly becoming a lot more closer to the end user, right? So we can leverage AI for daily tasks. There is now things how we can simplify basically the life of anyone. And it doesn't matter if you are searching for information, if you are trying to brainstorm creatively, get some new ideas, or if you are trying to put a content together and you would like some visual and you just want to describe the visual and get it in a matter of seconds. There is like countless number of use cases how pretty much anyone can leverage AI these days. Also, like to what I said previously, not being blind to that and like educating yourself a little bit with what's happening, because you don't want to miss out on all of those opportunities.
One of my favorite questions to ask our guests it comes down to this. This is a Beyond Seven Figures podcast. What would be your biggest, best tip for taking a company beyond seven figures?
Well, I would say, and I will repeat myself a little bit, because the way how we structured the conversation, right? We started with the obstacles. You should think about, if you are building a big company, you mean it seriously and you want to get beyond seven figures, make sure that you pick something that will motivate you to get through those obstacles. And it's fairly simple. It's nothing surprising. You just have to have passion and purpose for what you want to be doing and surround yourself with the right people. I feel like these are the most essential things that you can focus on early. So if you do that, then I think that you are well positioned to get there, but it's probably not going to happen overnight. I think we need to admit that.
When you love something, I tell people all the time, I would do what I do all the time anyway, even if I wasn't paid. Half the time I may be involved in a dinner conversation or whatnot, and I just start talking about this stuff because I love it, even if I'm not getting paid. And so when you go through these tough times, as all companies do, because there's no straight line ever observed in the universe, you're going to go through ups and downs, ups and downs. And you go through the tough times, you're going to do this stuff anyway because you love it so much. It just makes it that much easier to be able to push through, versus if you already hate what you do and you go through the tough times, it just compounds how much you hate it. And then it's really difficult to create that motivation to drive forward. So it's a really sound piece of advice. Now, Lubo, if somebody wants to reach out to you or learn more about your company, where do we send them?
If someone wants to learn more about STRV, strv.com is the website. Very simple. And when it comes to myself, Lubo Smid, on pretty much all social media platforms. So these are, I think, the best two contacts.
I can't imagine that there is a lot of Lubo Smids somewhere around social media. So I imagine if you look for Lubo Smid, I imagine they'll find you, especially if it comes to Lubo Smid STRV. Is that a fair statement?
It is a fair statement. I think that my name is fairly unique, so that makes my life quite easy.
There you go. Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Lubo, for being a guest here at the Beyond Seven Figures podcast. Now, just as a reminder, if you're looking for additional tips, strategies, and information to take your company beyond seven figures, check us out over at predictableprofits.com. Again, that's predictableprofits.com. This is Charles Gaudette with my new friend, Lubo Smid. I will see you in another episode.